Freeze the frame for just a second and listen to the quiet. 55 minutes. A pot of tea cooling on a low table at Clarence's house. A son who has made pain a public language. A father who has spent a lifetime swallowing storms. They met. They spoke. And if there is to be any peace between them, any real repair after years of interviews, books, and ricocheting headlines, it balances on a single condition, so old-fashioned it feels radical in 2025. Keep the door shut and the details inside. No confessions. No color. No sources close to. Silence as a strategy. Silence as a promise. Silence as the one rule that can hold. That is not my invention, or your wishful thinking. It is the blunt reading offered by Jenny Bond, a former BBC royal correspondent, who has watched more palace winters than most commentators have had birthdays. She calls the meeting what any grown-up would: short, charged, necessary. And then she names the price: discretion. The palace was never going to hide the fact that father and son finally shared a room. The fact was useful, even humane. But the contents? Off limits unless both sides agree, which, let's be adults, almost never happens. This is the cold truth of royal reconciliation. You earn your way back into a family by refusing the microphone that made you famous a second time. Now look at the pictures we actually got. No backstairs leak. No long lens catching an embrace. Only one on-the-record sentence from the Duke of Sussex, delivered later that evening at an Invictus reception, when a reporter tried to pick the lock: "He is great, thank you. If you were hunting for a grenade, you didn't get it. If you were listening for a tone, you did." Bland. Purposefully bland. The kind of answer that tells you the new rule has been read aloud and agreed. Say nothing that makes tomorrow harder than today. It helps to remember how we got here. The fracture did not begin with a flight to California. It began with a principle: the Sussexes wanted to choose their work, their words, and their protections. The institution insisted choices have consequences. 2020 was a doorway, not a verdict. What came after hardened the lines. Oprah in 2021. Netflix in 2022. A book in 2023 that read like a wound writing back. Each chapter did what it was designed to do: control the narrative, pin the blame, tell the truth as one man remembers it. Each chapter also corroded the one thing a family cannot lend and recover at will: trust. Then 2024 shoved everyone into a harsher light. Cancer. A word that makes even palaces speak softly. There was a dash from California and a brief look at a father behind a London door, the sort of impromptu arrival that feeds tabloids and starves goodwill. Anonymous quotes wafted like smoke, assigning fury and disdain to people who rarely cloak their feelings that crudely in public. The lesson, for anyone willing to learn it, was brutal and simple: in this house, surprise is the enemy of grace. If you want the room, you ask for it early and you keep the noise low. So September felt different, because it had to. Harry did the work first: Imperial College's Blast Injury Center, the Invictus commitments that still fit him like a uniform he didn't resent wearing. He made the pilgrimage second: St. George's Chapel, flowers placed where he once followed a coffin the world watched. Then the meeting. 55 minutes that say serious without flirting with drama. Not 10, which is theater. Not 2 hours, which is confession. Enough time to be real, not enough to be reckless. And when the door opened again, the only sentence allowed to escape was the one designed to do no damage. You can hear Jenny Bond's logic from here. The palace didn't mind the fact of the meeting being public, because facts are ballast, they steady a ship. But facts without color are also a test. Can Harry leave the edges UN-inked? Can he, for once, let the story breathe without helping it along with a paragraph or a podcast? Can Meghan, who knows the power of a platform better than most, resist the urge to curate a narrative around something that was deliberately left uncurated. Those are not snide questions. They are the price of readmission. Families have rules that don't print well. This is one of them. The other rules are older still. The Crown is not a diary, it is a roll, and rolls have guardrails. The heir does not freelance foreign policy. The sovereign does not invite a circus to his desk. Private wounds are not turned into public therapy, not because pain is shameful, but because the monarchy survives by keeping scale. Elizabeth II made that look effortless. Charles has to make it look deliberate. And William, the man who will sit where his father sits, has to show he understands that duty sometimes means accepting the optics you did not choose. You may want the Kiev frame, you may get the village hall. Both matter, only one keeps the machine from grinding its gears. That is why the timing of everything around this tea matters as much as the tea itself. Harry didn't arrive to an empty house, he arrived to a working one. The King's Day still included the briefings and the calls that make the lights come on in more than one realm at a time. If there were other family faces nearby, they were there because a calendar said so, not because a feud invited them to hover. The message is the same one the late Queen sent with her life: the job comes first, even when your heart is breaking, especially then. Put the work on the table before you put your feelings there. Then talk, and keep the voice low. If that sounds chilly, it is because we have mistaken noise for warmth. The most tender acts rarely survive broadcasting. Ask anyone who has sat in a hospital corridor at midnight to hold a hand and heard the whisper, "Don't tell anyone I cried." Grown-up love is often a conspiracy between two people against the world's appetite. That is what a reconciliation worth having will look like between Harry and his father. A series of private conspiracies that add up, over months, to something deserving of the public's respect again. Is the one rule realistic? Skeptics will say no. They will say a man who wrote a book that intimate cannot unlearn the habit of disclosure. They will point to a media economy that rewards confession with cash, clicks, and a day's worth of adoration. They will remind you that in California, silence is rarely monetized. Fair. But people change when the alternative hardens into forever. If the choice is keep talking and lose a father in slow motion, or keep the lid on and regain a decade of decent peace, most sons of good sense choose the latter. That is what Jenny Bond is betting on, and it is a bet worth placing. It helps that the first test was passed. Asked a direct question, Harry did not perform. He did not hint. He did not explain tone, or summarize moods, or report who said sorry first. He didn't even reach for a lightning bolt adjective. He is great, thank you. 7 words. Enough to let the curious breathe. Not enough to feed a beast. If you have lived long enough to value proportion over spectacle, you recognize the discipline in that line. If you haven't, you called it bland and moved on to someone else's noise. What comes next is not a montage, it is a maintenance schedule. More calls, not necessarily more meetings. A clearing of the brush so that if the king wishes to see his grandchildren, it can be done without a press rehearsal. A new habit of telling no one anything that was said on sofas where tea cools. The hard practice of not correcting bad headlines, not clarifying partial truths, not setting the record straight in a way that knocks the record over again. This is the maddening virtue of monarchy at its best. It stars on attention and thrives on routine. Do not confuse that discipline with indifference. The father is not a statue, the son is not a brand. They are people who miss a woman the rest of us also miss, whose absence has taught everyone left behind what it costs to pretend you have endless time. That is why a short meeting can be significant. It is a test balloon with a promise inside. Trust me with this small thing, and I will try to trust you with a larger one next time. The next time might be longer. It might include a quiet laugh. It might even include a sentence that begins, "I was wrong." That is how adult repairs are made, one small undramatic success at a time. Will the country accept reconciliation with conditions? Older Britons and Americans tend to understand bargains. You can welcome a prodigal, and still insist the house rules are not optional. You can forgive a book, and still detest a sequel that reopens wounds. You can cheer father and son in the same room and still insist that the room belongs to them, not to us. That was the late Queen's compact with the public. I will give you steadiness, you will give me space. Her son has to re-earn the same deal in a noisier age. His younger son has to decide whether belonging is worth biting his tongue. When you boil it down, Jenny Bond's one thing is not an edict, it is a lifeline. Privacy is not secrecy. It is the guardrail that keeps real feeling from tumbling back into performance. It is what lets a father be vulnerable without calculating how a sentence will look in print. It is what lets a son be contrite without wondering who will spin contrition into currency. If they can hold that line, if Harry can prove with time that he knows the difference between the locker room and the press conference, reconciliation is not only possible, it will feel natural. If they cannot, we will be back where we were. Two good men badly advised by their worst impulses, and a public too hungry to let them be human. So hold the frame a moment longer. 55 minutes, a teapot, a rule. The headlines will tell you this was a first step, and they will be right, but they will miss the staircase beneath it. Every step from here asks the same question: can you keep what matters unsaid? If the answer is yes, again, and again, and again, then one day the cameras will catch something that isn't staged. Two men walking out of a door together without needing to explain why. Until then, remember what the best of the monarchy has always asked of its audience and of itself: be seen when it helps, be quiet when it heals, and let trust grow where noise once lived.